This is Gurunath and Hindol Sengupta. I'm delighted to welcome Kanwal Sibal to this program once again. Ambassador Sibal requires no introduction. Today, we're going to discuss a whole range of issues with Ambassador Sibal, beginning, of course, with the question of where India is going with the United States. Ambassador, welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me again with pleasure.
Ambassador, I want to begin with that question. There has been substantial decline in Indian purchases of Russian oil. There is considerable talk about how India might be moving closer to cracking a final trade deal with Trump's United States. In your assessment, where do we stand in this troubled but vital relationship?
It is a bit unclear what the exact status of the nuclear deal is. Oh, sorry, the trade deal is. The reason is that from our side, at the official level, it has been said publicly, but also privately to me, for example, that whatever we needed to discuss with the Americans has been discussed. That whatever offer you made to the United States and was discussed with the USTR in July remains our position. There can be some tweaking here and there, but essentially that is the position. We have made apparently significant concessions on the industrial side, but on agriculture and dairy and GMOs and stuff like that, we are very firm. And this has been communicated to the United States. I think Piyush Goyal's public statement that there's no need for any further discussion sums it up rather well, and that the ball is now in the US court, which means Trump's court. Trump has not yet taken a decision. He's not signed off on this. He's still using the tariffs, especially the penalty tariffs, as a weapon to extract more concessions from us. I suppose he believes that he's in no hurry and that let India squirm. And at an appropriate time, he will see what needs to be done. He has used the oil weapon against us in an extremely unprincipled manner. And I say this for this reason, that America itself has been encouraging us to buy Russian oil in the past because they felt, and quite rightly so, that if 4.5 million barrels a day sort of disappeared from the international market, oil market, the prices will spike. And this is not what the United States wanted. The former US ambassador to India, Garcetti, while he was in office here, actually stated publicly that they had encouraged India to buy Russian oil for the reason I mentioned. Since then, in the United States, he's made more than once statements to this effect. Not only that, the former US Commerce Secretary has said the same thing. Now, if for all these years, despite the fact they were unhappy with us that we were buying Russian oil, it's not as if the Biden administration was very, very happy with us, but nevertheless, they saw some merit in not pushing the whole thing beyond a certain point to create a crisis in our relations. And suddenly, Trump puts the blame on the continuation of the war in Ukraine on India buying Russian oil and giving Russia financial means to continue the war. And his henchmen, whether it is Besant or Luknik or Peter Navarro, have been very obnoxious in the statements that they have made on this point. Now, I began by saying that Trump has been very unprincipled on this, and I say this because now that he has sanctioned two major Russian oil companies, the two biggest ones had been sanctioned earlier. Now all the major oil companies of Russia have been sanctioned, which means, therefore, that in any case we'll be obliged to reduce our oil purchases from Russia because our private sector companies who have very big interests in the United States in other sectors are not going to risk falling afoul of US laws, and therefore seeing the U.S. financial market being close to them, et cetera, et cetera. Similarly, in public sector companies uh, also have an interest in the U.S. financial market, the bank loans, raising funds, this and that internationally. So they would also like to be careful. So in that sense, we are now obliged to reduce our oil purchases from Russia. Now, having done that, what is the reason for continuing the penalty tariffs on India? But he's still doing so, and we are the most tariffed country apart from Brazil. I understand on good authority that it has been conveyed to Trump at the highest level, quite frankly, that you are damaging India-US relations to the point that we may have problems later on because the public is becoming, the sentiment in the public is becoming anti-US. And in future, therefore, it will be difficult to handle the relationship. Trump apparently gave a very wishy-washy reply and didn't give any clear answer, which is why I understand that the prime minister did not go to Kuala Lumpur because this matter was not uh, either resolved or indications given that it was on the track of being resolved. Now, last point in this U.S. ambassador designate to India, Sergio Gore, visited India before Diwali, which and unusually in protocol terms, he got a call on our prime minister. And obviously, the background of this must have been that he was carrying a message from Trump, and therefore the expectation was that he would come and sort this out one way or the other. Apparently, he came with a message that India had to make concessions on oil and this and that and that, uh, with the result that um, the ground was not prepared for announcing the trade deal on Diwali Day. I understand. That would have dramatized, if you like, the deal if it was done on an auspicious occasion. So there it is. Trump is still holding back. At some stage, if the Supreme Court rules against him, he will have to review his decision in general, not necessarily in relation to India. Uh, he is already, uh, and this is the hypocrisy of it, Hindol, that he has exempted Germany from these sanctions. He exempted Britain. He's exempted Hungary. He's exempted Japan. So what is his problem with us? And on top of it, United States itself is buying huge amounts of enriched uranium and palladium and other metals from Russia. So it's not as if India is only financing Putin's war in Russia. Europe is financing. United States itself is financing. Japan is financing. So it is totally irrational what he's doing.
Thank you, Ambassador. If you could throw some light on the following. Trump's tariffs, which he announced across the world, is also at a very interesting juncture because around the world there is conversation, including you saw the article written by Raf Doshi only a couple of days ago, saying that in a sense, Trump's tariffs have brought to a particular point, has brought America to a particular point where China, for the first time, has demonstrated that it is, in a sense, a power equivalent of America, considering what they did to push back against the tariffs. And therefore, in a sense, even Trump's visit to meet Xi Jinping, he definitely looked like even in body language, the weaker partner in that conversation. Now, of course, the Chinese do a lot of these things to, project power and so on and so forth. But I want you to reflect on this, that the tariffs haven't worked perhaps as Trump would have thought in China. Therefore, why is he pushing them, or why is he pushing, or why is he reluctant to rule them back against India, considering they've already not worked with China?
They have worked with Europe. Europe, in fact, has made the concessions to the United States, which are humiliating in nature. $750 billion of crude they will buy, LNG they'll buy from United States. They will invest $500 billion in in United States and buy defense items from the United States. Japan has been humiliated. They are going to invest, or they have committed, whether they'll do it or not, $500 billion or some figure like that in United States. And so will South Korea, about $350 billion. And the temerity of the United States, of Besant to say, or Lutnik, one of the two, no, Besant, I think, that what South Korea will be doing is some kind of a sovereign US fund. Because when this money of $350 billion comes, it will be entirely up to Trump to decide in which sectors of the US economy it will be invested. And 90% of the profits will go to the United States. So he has humiliated big powers, or which are part of this European Union. He has browbeaten Canada, he's browbeaten Mexico, he's browbeaten UK, he's browbeaten Japan, South Korea, and therefore his tail is up. And therefore he felt that India could easily be browbeaten because India doesn't have the heft to retaliate. Now, when it came to China, he realized that he didn't have all the cards in his hand. And when China uh, placed restrictions on the export of rare earths and rare earth magnets and other critical raw materials, then suddenly United States felt that it could not get its way with China. Uh, but to say that at this meeting in Busan, uh, China won the game or came out on top might be a bit of exaggeration for this reason.
Yeah.
Uh, 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 China has the capacity and has shown the capacity to hit back, uh, but it's not as if China can have its way. China itself has economic issues it has to deal with domestically. Uh, it needs although it has diversified away from the US market, it still needs the US market. Its economy is still export dependent. And given the fact that they are having problems of unemployment uh, and the housing estate collapse, etc., etc., it's not as if they can de-link themselves from the global market, including the United States. And I think they're also afraid of sanctions of the kind United States has applied on Russia. So it is true that they have pushed back and they had some means to push back, and Trump has stepped back because the farmers in the Midwest were crying horse because they couldn't sell soybean
Soybeans, yes, soybeans, yes.
to China. But I'd say on balance, he has been certainly rebuffed. He has found that his tariff weapon is not as effective against China as with other countries. But the balance of power still remains with the United States. I say this because after all this he has done, all this has happened, he has sanctioned $350 million of military aid to Taiwan. Uh, and also, so it's not as if uh, he's stepping back from the larger policy of trying to contain China, and much of it, what he's doing domestically in terms of developing domestic capacity in semiconductors, in rare earths, and everything else, and tying up wherever he can access to rare earths, and surely they'll begin reprocessing rare earths in the United States. But originally, Hindol, uh, they had a major company in USA which was doing reprocessing, but the Chinese bought it and all the technology was transferred to China. And since it's highly polluting the industry, so China, was able to uh, uh, process them and gain dominance in this market, which United States yielded. Just as Germany, I thought they were so much in advance of everybody else in solar panels. in this, um, and then the entire technology was transferred to China, and now the Germany is nowhere, and China dominates this market. So I think United States will work overtime to develop some degree of autonomy and not be that dependent on China, including in the area of APIs, pharmaceuticals. So the last word has not been said, but let me add one thing though. From our point of view, although we have great differences with China, and we don't want China to become a hegemon of the kind the United States is, but it helps us when a country like China pushes the United States back and shows that the United States cannot have its way. This broadens the whole geopolitical scene and helps country like ours to be able to play a more ambitious role in terms of marking the international scene with our ideas and pursuing our interests. So any pushback to the Western hegemony, which has lasted now for so many decades, is in the larger perspective a good thing. Though, mind you, as I said, uh, we neither want a G2, nor do we want China being the supreme player in Asia. But nevertheless, I think in terms of multipolarity, the effectiveness of BRICS and SCO and all that, any pushback to the United States is helpful.
I also want you to comment on Trump's comments on retesting nuclear weapons once again. I mean, this again has opened up Pandora's box. And I want you to comment on how you see this. Because if genuinely the United States starts to test again, then, in a sense, all bets are off. There are many other countries waiting in the wing who will want to test again. Indeed, there are voices in India who say that perhaps India should test again. So I wonder how you see these comments by Trump.
Astonishing, because it makes absolutely no sense. One would have thought that he probably doesn't understand these things sufficiently enough, and therefore he made a very loose comment after Russia demonstrated earlier on is Oreshnik, and now this Burobetnik, and this water submarine, extremely effective weapons that, in a sense, since Trump is vainglorious and wants to be on top of everything, so he wanted to flex U.S. muscles that he's going to start nuclear testing, confusing between a missile, which is nuclear powered, and a nuclear test. Now, the U.S. Energy Secretary made it very clear that they have no plans to do any testing, but nevertheless, he has come back on that, and so has the U.S. Defense Secretary. Now, the other thing is that in terms of their nuclear test sites in Nevada, the experts say they'll take about 2 years to develop those sites for testing once again. So it's not as if we can do this tomorrow. Then the other thing is that under the CTBT, all countries are entitled to do subcritical tests, non-explosive tests. And they've been doing them. They've been doing them after all when Obama announced that he has set aside $1 trillion to modernize the U.S. nuclear arsenal and to develop more deliverable bombs. Obviously, it was based on subcritical testing. And Trump himself, in his first term, talked about this plan of refurbishing and modernizing the U.S. nuclear arsenal. He didn't talk about testing. Now, if he tests, Putin has said very clearly that Russia will test. If Russia tests, China will have no reason not to test. And India will test, and India should test. I'm not saying that could test, should test for this reason, that if you remember when the CTBT negotiations started, during the course of the negotiations, the French conducted several tests, before the door closed. And I was at that time still in service, and I was wondering, why don't we take this opportunity to start testing ourselves? Narasimha Rao tried to do it, but the Americans put the fear of God on him. Uh, and eventually Vajpayee did it, but much too late when everybody else had tested and the CTBD had been signed and the doors on us had been closed. And then we pushed the doors open and invited the sanctions and everything else. Now, if this time, if others test and we don't test, we'll begin committing a very serious mistake. But if the United States takes this step, it is the end of the non-proliferation treaty, because the entire balance of the non-proliferation treaty was that the nuclear weapon countries will disarm, will begin a process, genuine process of disarmament, as against which the non-nuclear countries will not go in for nuclear weapons. But now, if they start testing again, that bargain is over, and then North Korea can test. And the irony of that, Hindol, is that he bombs the Iranian nuclear sites because don't want Iran to get a nuclear weapon. But the United States, even though it has 4,000 nuclear weapons or whatever, and along with the United States is the principal nuclear power in the world, wants to test and make their nuclear potential even more powerful. It just doesn't make sense. It is such utter hypocrisy that it's almost it's unspeakable.
I also want to ask you, Ambassador, if I may, that you just said that India also should test if this comes to pass. I wondered whether you could, give some of your comments on how you see this pan out in case the US genuinely does test. How should India respond?
You see that two ways that one can respond. If we take a very moral position and deplore what is happening and express fears that now this will open the Pandora's box and create insecurities around and this and that and that. In effect, therefore, we'll be closing the doors on ourselves. You can't have it both ways. That you condemn the U.S. action and take a moral position, and in effect use the logic of the non-proliferation treaty to say that this can open up a Pandora's box, and then test yourself. Right. So I think that the right thing to do would be to say that India had forsworn tests immediately after we did the ones in 1998, any future tests. We did not want the nuclear dimension of international relations to become even more problematic, especially when the geopolitics in the world is getting very fraught. And with the Ukraine war, there has been talk about potential use of nuclear weapons, tactical nuclear weapons. And we have a nuclear weapon country in our neighborhood, which continues to threaten us with nuclear weapons. And we have China and Pakistan collaborating with each other. So in these circumstances, if the US tests and other countries follow suit, we'll have no option but to test.
Actually, when you talk this conversation, I want you to comment a little bit what's happening and how you see what's happening in the United States society. We had the Bamdani election, of course, in New York. We're seeing what's happening in places like Michigan and Minnesota. We're seeing what's happening in the Midwest. I mean, in some senses, to people outside America, it seems like the fissures in that society are becoming more and more deep. And especially now, if in a sense, many people argue that Zoran Mamdani will not be able to fulfill any of the economic promises he has made to New Yorkers, and yet he will use that pulpit to continuously say things like he will arrest, the Netanyahu, he will, speak against, other country, maybe comment on India. Already he said something absolutely untrue, which is that supposedly there are no Muslims left in Gujarat. So this is a man given to this kind of instinct. And there are parts, and rather large parts of the American political system, especially the Democratic Party, which seems to be stoking these things. And, the fissures, therefore, in that society are growing. I wonder whether you could comment a little bit about how you see this panning out within American society and otherwise.
A few things. One, of course, it is common knowledge now that the U.S. Society is highly polarized between the MAGA bit of it and the Democrats, the woke liberal uh, element of U.S. Society. Uh, so, in that sense, this polarization which exists is likely to become even deeper. And for this reason, that if you look at the demography of the United States, the non-white population of the United States is growing very rapidly. And by end of 2040s, by 2047 or something like that, statistics are very clear that the majority of the US population would be non-white. Now, this has other repercussions in terms of larger, uh, social consequences. And then not only that, by that time, 2047 for 2049 or whatever, the median age of the whites in United States will be 63 years, whereas the median age of the Latino population will be between 12 and 18 years. So you just imagine how the productivity of the white population would decline rapidly, and the burden of building society and building the society and growth and everything else will fall on the non-white population. Inevitably, therefore, a shift of power within United States. And this is why there is this racist element in the MAGA base, this deeply anti-migration sentiment that has spread in the United States. And these fissures are now going to be resolved. In fact, they were going to become deeper and deeper. Now, when it comes to Mamdani, I think what has happened is a bit of a replica of what has happened already in the United Kingdom, where almost all major cities have Muslim mayors. So one has to understand what the demographic changes are in the large cities, in the urban areas where the immigrants tend to congregate uh, together, and therefore they can affect the electoral process. And this is what has happened in New York now. Plus the fact that New York is a democratic state with a large mix of population. Uh, the younger generation uh, is also left oriented, and this whole business of what's happened in Gaza has traumatized genuinely a lot of people, because the death and destruction in Gaza, even if you are against terrorism as you should be, still the kind of suffering that you see affects the minds, especially of the youngsters. And therefore they voted for him. Plus, of course, he's followed the ARP technique, promising free bus rides, free creches for children, uh, 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 you know, housing rents will be blocked where they are, plus other things like that. And this also reflects the fact that the US society has become very unequal, where if you look at the figures, 2-3% growth rate, stuff like that, fine. But in terms of distribution of wealth in the country, it is extremely skewed. And in fact, part of the reason why Trump has won the election is because of this. But of course, it was the Midwest and all that, and their standard of living declining, unemployment and stuff like that. And therefore, in a city like New York, you have a lot of billionaires, but you also have population which is unable to support itself, food stamps and everything else. So he's appealed to that public and won the election. And finally, I think maybe there is also a disenchantment with the Western side democracies. It is certainly there in parts of Europe, and in fact, large parts of Europe, and also in the United States. So it's a mix of all these factors which accounts for the success of Mamdani. But what actually surprises me is the kind of attention we are paying to Mamdani's election, as if it is a big election in India, and the consequences of that election, let's say in UP, are the same as this fellow who's been elected mayor. And there's some commentary I read which makes you laugh, but also makes you feel sad. That, oh, Modi hasn't congratulated Mamdani. Come on. I mean,
I saw a retort, a clever, quippy retort to that Mamdani has failed to congratulate Nitish Kumar.
no, this is ridiculous. That lobby in India, which is linked to these lobbies abroad, they are hoping that the Mamdani's style of victory can somehow happen in India and destabilize the BJP. That sort of nonsense. And finally, I've seen Mamdani's comments on Modi and BJP and India, and that again surprises me. That given the background of this man and his political views, we want to own him, or at least a section of our people wants to own him and lionize him, and see in an election on the other side of the globe in a particular city where all the dynamics are at work, where I said, as a kind of a thing that or a model development that could take place in India is ridiculous.
One last question for you, Ambassador, if I may, and which is that, we're already towards the, middle of Trump's, we're moving towards the middle of Trump's latest term. Talk to me a little bit about how you see America in a post-Trump scenario. Are you one of those people who thinks J.D. Vance is a natural contender? Are you in a different sort of way, seeing a deeper fissure, perhaps more shutdown of government, perhaps deeper collision between the Democrats and the Republicans? Where do you stand, and how do you see a post-Trump world in America?
I think JD, the contest will be between JD Vance and Mark Rubio, and both will continue to position themselves for that post going forward. It will also depend on who Trump backs, whether he backs Vance or whether he backs Rubio. We will see how this plays out. It will also depend on what happens in the midterm elections. If the Republicans lose the House, this will begin to tarnish the image of Trump as someone who controls the Republican Party to such an extent that only those candidates whom he backs can win, although this has been disproved in recent elections. But if they lose the House, then Trump's wings will be clipped. And then this may also then have some consequences for the next presidential election, except that for the time being, there's huge amount of despondency in Democratic circles because they are in total disarray, they're ineffective. And in fact, the view is that the Democrats must absolutely win the House if they want to have a good chance, or reasonable chance, to successfully fight the presidential election. That pulpit they need. But if they cannot win the House, then they're not going to be able to win the next presidential election, no matter what Trump does or does not do. So I think in that sense, the situation is uncertain, is unclear, and the tipping point in terms of reasonable assessments would be what happens in the midterm elections in November. Insofar as India is concerned, I think with the Democrats, even though there was this undercurrent of unhappiness, our unhappiness because they were attacking us on democracy and minority rights and human rights and everything else, but yet very, very substantial progress was made in our ties in the areas in which we are interested, technology and stuff like that. Trump has uh, has not shown any interest in that. In fact, that has receded into the background. So if the Democrats come back in power, whoever it is, we can be, our relationship would be all right. If the Republicans minus Trump come back, I think we'll be also on a fairly good wicket. It is Trump and his personality and his irrationality and his egoism and his narcissism and his obsession with tariffs, as if tariffs are a kind of a weapon that can be used as part of geopolitics, of serious geopolitics. Uh, it, it is not the case. It is not the case. Tariffs are an important element in terms of structuring the global trading system, but it cannot replace uh, the the geopolitics part of what's happening. Geopolitics is a far more complicated affair. Uh, it is not only based on economics. I mean, if geopolitics was based only on economics, we should have a wonderful tie. We should have wonderful ties with China, for instance. but that's not the case. So there are a whole gamut of issues involved in relations between countries. For him to reduce relationship simply tariffs is actually such a narrow and how shall I say, irrelevant way of dealing with complex global geopolitics. So if this Trump way of looking at the world through the lens of tariffs is removed in the next election, and a traditional Republican kind of president comes into power with the belief of the Republicans in free and open markets, etc. It'll be good for us. Remember, how Trump has reacted to Reagan and what Reagan said about tariffs. He's so utterly upset with Canada because they played that thing. So, so he's not in the Republican mainstream at all.
Excellent. We'll, as always, a wonderful conversation, Mr. Sibal. No wonder we will all keep tracking this US-India relationship closely. And indeed, the Trump presidency. Thanks very much. I'm sure we'll have opportunities to talk to you in further detail as the days and weeks go by. Thanks very much for your time.
My pleasure. All the best. All the best.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.